Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Jonathan Evans.
And I'm Ashley Thompson. This program is aimed at English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today on the program, Ashley and I will bring you stories along with Kelly Jean Kelly and Anna Mateo. Later, we will present our American history program, The Making of a Nation. But first, here is Kelly Jean Kelly.
The Ebola outbreak in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo is moving toward Goma, a city of 1 million people. The United Nations says nearly 2,000 people are being prepared to deal with patients there. If Ebola virus disease reaches Goma, stopping it will become even more difficult. The campaign against Ebola is already affected by other issues. People travel often and come in contact with strangers. Another concern is security. In eastern Congo, health workers face threats of attack from rebel groups. Health workers also need to deal with the fears of local people. One woman spoke to the medical group Doctors Without Borders about her experience. Aline Kahindo Mukundala said she thought Ebola patients who went to medical centers were immediately put into body bags. Another survivor told people that foreign health workers will not steal patients' organs. The man is currently helping the International Committee of the Red Cross. Still, some people remain afraid of treatment or prevention measures and try to flee the area. Millions of people have been tested for Ebola at border crossings with Rwanda and Uganda. Congo's health ministry has reported at least 700 confirmed Ebola cases, including more than 160 children. Over 400 people have already died from the disease, and new cases are still appearing without any known connection to a confirmed patient. This shows the difficulty of hunting down the virus in a crowded and worried population. At the same time, the World Health Organization says some public health measures have been helping limit the virus in a few areas. These measures include training health workers and working closely with people who live in the area. This Ebola outbreak has also brought some medical advances. Health workers are trying experimental treatments for people who have the virus. They are also using a new Ebola vaccine to prevent people from getting the virus. But how well the vaccine works is not yet known. Some people who have received it have still become sick. I'm Kelly Jean Kelly.
Pope Francis has become the first pope in history to visit the Arabian Peninsula, the birthplace of Islam. Francis opened his official visit Monday in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates. Top UAE officials welcomed the leader of the world's 1.3 billion Roman Catholics at the presidential palace. The Pope received a traditional military welcome that included a flyover by UAE military aircraft. The airplanes left smoke in yellow and white, the official colors of the Vatican flag. Welcoming the Pope were Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the UAE's Vice President and Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. In a message, Pope Francis thanked the Crown Prince for the warm welcome and said the UAE people were in his thoughts and prayers. Sheikh Mohammed presented the Pope with a document from 1963 in which the then ruler of Abu Dhabi donated land to build the first Catholic church in the Emirates. The UAE is home to about 1 million Roman Catholics. Many of them are workers from the Catholic majority Philippines. On social media, Sheikh Mohammed wrote about his meeting with the Pope. He said they discussed increased cooperation in several areas. They also agreed to seek ways to achieve peace, stability, and development for all people. Pope Francis also attended a gathering of leaders from major world religions, including Christianity and Islam. The Pope told the meeting that religious leaders have a duty to reject war and seek to resolve conflict through negotiation. God is with those who seek peace, he said in the speech at Abu Dhabi's Founders Memorial. Pope Francis warned that unless people of different religions come together to seek concrete paths of peace, the future of humanity itself will be in danger. Speaking in Italian, the Pope noted conflicts in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Libya. He called on the religious leaders to resist such floods of violence.
Many of America's national parks remained open during the country's longest ever government shutdown. But few had enough National Park Service employees working to protect the areas and keep watch of visitors. Those visitors did a lot of damage in 35 days. They walked over sensitive lands. They opened gates while no one was watching. One person even struck one of California's famous Joshua trees with a vehicle. When Park Service employees returned to work last week, they began cleaning up and repairing what they could. But environmental experts warn that the damage in some places could take years to recover. Even before the shutdown, national parks faced $12 billion in much-needed repair work. That number has only grown. Many parks had no employees working during the shutdown. Others had skeleton crews. Local governments and nonprofit organizations offered money and volunteers during the shutdown, which began on December 21st and ended on January 25th. National Park Service spokesman Mike Litterst told reporters that the damage was not widespread. He said most visitors took good care of the land. But interviews with park officials and nonprofit groups that help keep parks running tell a different story. Angie Richmond is a spokeswoman at Arches National Park in Utah. She said visitors left human waste outside a bathroom, walked on trails within an area that was off limits to visitors, and damaged an entrance gate. At Joshua Tree National Park, an off-road vehicle ran over one of the park's special trees. Several other Joshua trees were damaged, including one that was spray painted. A former Joshua Tree National Park ranger told Smithsonian.com that it could take 200 to 300 years for the park to fully recover from the shutdown damage. At Great Smoky Mountains National Park, visitors cut locks on some gates to closed roads and stole about $5,000 in repair tools, spokeswoman Dana Sohn said. Employees at Death Valley National Park in California found human waste and toilet paper all across the desert. Park officials also found evidence of people kicking in locked bathroom doors. And a high-speed video on Death Valley's Facebook page shows how it took staffers 2 hours to clean a bathroom overflowing with trash and covered with waste. Workers at Death Valley National Park must replant in areas damaged by off-road vehicles.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Health and Lifestyle Report. Scientists in London say they have found the best diet for both humans and the planet. If the world followed the so-called Planetary health diet, the scientists told Reuters that each year more than 11 million early deaths could be prevented. For the health of the planet, they claim the same diet would reduce greenhouse gases and save more land, water, and animals. This new food plan is the result of a 3-year project organized by the Lancet Health Journal. It involved 37 experts from 16 countries. Tim Lang, a professor at Britain's University of London, co-led the research. He told Reuters, "The food we eat and how we produce it determines the health of people and the planet, and we are currently getting this seriously wrong." Lang added that the world's population is expected to grow to 10 billion people by 2050. If we want to feed everyone, he explained, we all need to change what we eat and the way we eat by improving food production and reducing food waste. So what do you eat on the Planetary health diet? The scientists who created this diet say it is largely plant-based, but still has small amounts of dairy, fish, and meat. The diet calls for cutting red meat and sugar by 50% and doubling the amount of nuts, fruits, vegetables, and legumes. Food situations around the world are not equal. In certain areas, this would mean great changes. People in North America, for example, eat 6.5 times the recommended amount of red meat. On the other hand, people in South Asia eat only half the amount suggested by the new Planetary health diet. Meeting the targets for vegetables would need big changes in other areas. In sub-Saharan Africa, people on average eat 7.5 times the suggested amount of vegetables, like potatoes and cassava. Walter Willett of Harvard University in the United States also talked to Reuters about the planetary health diet. He said that more than 800 million people around the world do not get enough food, while many more have very unhealthy diets. The scientists admit their goal will be difficult to achieve, but for them, doing nothing is also not an option. Willett said, if we can't quite make it, it's better to try and get as close as we can. And that's the Health and Lifestyle Report. I'm Anna Mateo.
Welcome to The Making of a Nation, American History in VOA Special English. On a cold and cloudy day in March of 1861, Abraham Lincoln became the 16th President of the United States. In his inaugural speech, the new president announced the policy that he would follow toward the southern states that had left the Union. Lincoln said no state had a legal right to secede. The Union could not be broken. He said he would enforce federal laws in every state. And he promised not to surrender any federal property in the states that seceded. Lincoln said if force was necessary to protect the Union, then force would be used. His policy was soon tested. Jack Weitzel and Jack Moyles discussed the dispute over the federal base that was being built at Fort Sumter.
On his second day as president, Lincoln received some bad news from Fort Sumter at Charleston, South Carolina. Major Robert Anderson, the commander of the small United States force at Sumter, wrote that his food supplies were low. At most, said Anderson, there was enough food for 40 days. Unless he and his men received more supplies, they would have to leave the fort. Lincoln wanted to keep Fort Sumter. It was one of the few United States forts in the South still held by federal forces, and he had promised not to give up any federal property in the states that seceded.
But getting food to Fort Sumter would be a very difficult job. The fort was built on an island in Charleston Harbor. It was surrounded by Southern artillery. Southern gunboats guarded the port. To get supplies to Anderson and his men, a ship would have to fight its way to Sumter. Such a battle was sure to begin a bitter civil war. There also was the danger that fighting would cause slave states still in the Union to secede and join the Southern Confederacy.
The Army chief, General Scott, warned Lincoln that it was too late to get supplies to Fort Sumter. He said Southern defenses around the fort were so strong that a major military effort would be necessary. He said it would take months to prepare the warships and soldiers for such an effort. Major Anderson and his men at Sumter, he said, could not wait that long. There was another plan, however, that might work. It was proposed to Lincoln by Captain Gustavus Fox of the Navy Department. Captain Fox said soldiers and supplies could be sent down to Charleston in ships. Outside the entrance to the harbor, on a dark night, they could be put into small boats and pulled by tugs to the fort. Fox said a few warships could be sent to prevent Southern gunboats from interfering.
Lincoln liked this plan. He asked his cabinet for advice. If it were possible to send supplies to Sumter, he asked, would it be wise to do so? Postmaster General Blair was the only member of the cabinet to answer yes. Treasury Secretary Chase was for the plan only if Lincoln was sure it would not mean war. Secretary of State Seward and the others opposed it. They said it would be better to withdraw Major Anderson and his men. They felt that now was not the time to start a civil war. This opposition in the cabinet caused Lincoln to postpone action on the Fox plan. But he sent 2 men separately to Charleston to get him information on the situation there. One was Captain Fox. The other was a close friend, Ward Lamon.
In Charleston, Fox met with Governor Pickens. He explained that he wished to talk with Major Anderson, not to give him orders, but to find out what the situation really was. Governor Pickens agreed. A Confederate boat carried Fox to Sumter. Anderson told Fox that the last of the food would be gone on April 15th. Ward Lamon went to Charleston after Fox returned to Washington. He, too, met with Governor Pickens and Major Anderson. The South Carolina governor asked Lamon to give Lincoln this message: nothing can prevent war except a decision by the President of the United States to accept the secession of the South. If an attempt is made to put more men in Fort Sumter, a war cry will be sounded from every hilltop and valley in the South. Lamon reported to Lincoln that the arrival of even a boatload of food at Sumter would lead to fighting.
At the end of March, Lincoln held another cabinet meeting and again asked what should be done about Fort Sumter. Should an attempt be made to get supplies to Major Anderson? This time, 3 members of the cabinet voted yes and 3 voted no. When the meeting ended, Lincoln wrote an order for the Secretary of War. He told him to prepare to move men and supplies by sea to Fort Sumter. He said they should be ready to sail as early as April 6th, only 1 week away.
On April 4th, Lincoln called Captain Fox to the White House. He told him that the government was ready to take supplies to Fort Sumter. He said Fox would lead the attempt. Lincoln showed Fox a message he was sending to Governor Pickens in South Carolina. It read, "This is to inform you that an attempt will be made to supply Fort Sumter with food only. If this attempt is not opposed, no effort will be made to throw in men, arms, or ammunition." Governor Pickens received the message on April 8th. He immediately sent it by telegraph to Confederate President Jefferson Davis at Montgomery, Alabama. Davis called a meeting of his cabinet to discuss what should be done. He asked if Fort Sumter should be seized before supplies could arrive.
Former United States Senator Robert Toombs of Georgia was the Confederate Secretary of State. He told Davis, "Firing upon that fort will begin a civil war greater than any the world has ever seen." I cannot advise you. Later in the meeting, Toombs urged Davis not to attack the fort. "Mr. President," he said, "at this time it is suicide, murder, and will lose us every friend in the North. You will strike a hornet's nest which extends from mountains to oceans. Millions now quiet will swarm out and sting us to death. It is not necessary. It puts us in the wrong. It will kill us."
On April 10th, Jefferson Davis sent his decision to the Confederate commander at Charleston, General Pierre Beauregard. He told Beauregard to demand the surrender of Fort Sumter. If Major Anderson refused, then the general was to destroy the fort. The surrender demand was carried to Sumter the next day by a group of Confederate officers. They said Anderson and his men must leave the fort, but they could take with them their weapons and property. And they were offered transportation to any United States port they named.
Anderson rejected the demand. As he walked with the Confederate officers back to their boat, he asked if General Beauregard would open fire on Sumter immediately. No, they said. He would be told later when the shooting would start. Anderson then told the Southerners, "If you do not shell us to pieces, hunger will force us out in a few days." General Beauregard informed the Confederate government in Montgomery that Anderson refused to surrender. He also reported the major's statement that Sumter had only enough food for a few more days.
New orders were sent to Beauregard. Jefferson Davis said there was no need to attack the fort if hunger would soon force the United States soldiers to leave. But he said Anderson must say exactly when he and his men would leave. And he said Anderson must promise not to fire on Confederate forces. If Anderson agreed to this, then Confederate guns would remain silent. This offer was carried to Fort Sumter a few minutes before midnight, April 11th. Anderson discussed the offer with his officers and then wrote his answer. He would leave the fort on April 15th if the Confederates made no hostile act against Fort Sumter or against the United States flag. He would not leave, however, if before then he received new orders or supplies.
This did not satisfy the three Confederate officers who brought Beauregard's message. They handed Anderson a short note. It said, "We have the honor to inform you that General Beauregard will open fire on Fort Sumter in 1 hour at 20 minutes after 4 on the morning of April 12, 1861. The major shook hands with Beauregard's representatives, and they left the fort. Anderson and his officers woke their men and told them to prepare for battle. At Fort Johnson, across the harbor, Confederate gunners also were getting ready. These men would fire the first shot at Sumter. That explosion would signal the other guns surrounding the fort to open fire.
And that's our program for today. Listen again tomorrow to learn English through stories from around the world. I'm Jonathan Evans.
And I'm Ashley Thompson.